Hello everyone, welcome to the Bio 105 lab, exercise 9. This video we're going to be talking about the protists. So protists are eukaryotic organisms. What does that mean? It means that they have a few characteristics in common, things that we also have as humans. One of those is a membrane-bound nucleus. They have a number of organelles inside their cells. They have, if they have a cell wall, it is made of chitin or cellulose as opposed to peptidoglycan in our bacteria and archaea. And their DNA has many linear chromosomes, unlike bacteria or archaea that have one circular chromosome and tiny plasmids. Protists are an extremely diverse assortment of eukaryotes. There's no real unifying characteristics. Traditional classifications split them up into plant-like photosynthetic single-celled organisms, and we call those algae, and then animal-like single-celled organisms, which we call protozoans. Our current classification has broken them up into supergroups. Each of these represent a separate evolutionary lineage. The reason we've done this is the DNA evidence we now have has shown us where these evolutionary lineages lie, rather than just grouping organisms based on what they look or act like. So protists are especially important because they form the basis for a lot of food webs. Some are primary producers, meaning that they photosynthetically take sunlight and turn it into energy. And some are decomposers, which means they take dead things, break those down, and release that energy into the environment. Some cause disease in humans, animals, and in plants. We'll talk about a few of those. So, out of our supergroups, the first one we're going to talk about is Archiplastida. And these are green algae. Most of them are living in marine or freshwater environments. Many are unicellular, but some are multicellular. An example of that is something called sea lettuce. If you went down to the ocean side right now, you could find that growing on rocks. Some live in colonies, like our volvox. So this is sort of simple organization, right, of individuals. All of them are photosynthetic, meaning that they can use sunlight to produce their own food. And another way to refer to that is that they are autotrophs. And some of them may have flagella. So a flagella is a whip-like organ that they can use to swim through the water. Also in Archiplastida are our red algae. These are also multicellular. Most of them are deep water marine organisms. They possess red and blue pigments. The reason that happens is because they live lower in the water column. The colors of light that get to them are actually better absorbed by red and blue pigments rather than green. Some of these are commercially important, that they are used to make things like agar and carrageenan. So carrageenan is a thickening agent. If you've ever had a McDonald's or a Wendy's shake, you have had carrageenan. So the S in SAR stands for straminopiles. The first one we're going to talk about are golden algae. They are mostly freshwater. They have flagella. They're photosynthetic organisms, meaning they make their own food from sunlight, and they sometimes cause fish kills. They'll produce a toxin that sometimes kills fish. The next straminopile are brown algae. These are mostly marine. They are photosynthetic, right, meaning they make their own food from the sun, and they're commonly known as kelp or seaweed. If you guys have been to the beach, you've seen these. You could go to the beach right now. If you find any of the greenish, brownish, knotted wrack or any of those sort of kelps, those are our brown algae. Then we've got supergroup. Next in supergroups are, and our last straminopile are the water molds. Now we refer to them as molds, but they are not fungus. Right? They're fungus-like heterotrophs. They're a protist. They can cause plant diseases like the late blight that caused the Great Potato Famine in Ireland. Some are used as biocontrol for plant fungus themselves, however, and are used to control actual fungi that would destroy crops. Next up, the A in SAR, alveolates. Right? These include ciliates. True to their name, they are covered in cilia. These are basically like very short flagella that will sort of flap through the water and move them around. They have very diverse body plans, as you can see by this photo here. There is a number of different ciliates. They are generally heterotrophs, meaning that they eat other organisms, but the number of them have endosymbiotic algae that will actually produce food for them. Right? So they're algae that will live, green algae that will live inside them rather than being consumed. They're present in almost every water body, and some of them can get as large as 4 millimeters, which is just crazy for a single-celled organism. Next up in the alveolates are dinoflagellates. All right, if you've ever heard of red tide, this is the organism that causes that. They're present in marine and fresh water. They're photosynthetic. They're an important part of marine plankton. Right, so there's a lot of zooplankton that eat these guys. They can cause that toxic red tide, like we said, but some of them are also bioluminescent. So they will glow blue with their own light. So if you've seen any videos of waves that are glowing blue or dolphins swimming through blue bioluminescence, in some cases, dinoflagellates are responsible for that. Apricomflexins. So these guys are obligate endoparasites, meaning that they can't live outside of a host organism. There is not a single one of them that just lives on its own. They all live within other organisms. They have complex multi-stage life cycles, and they can cause disease such as malaria and toxoplasmosis. Still in supergroup SAR, we're moving on to the R in SAR, or Rhizaria. The first ones are Formifers. They are marine plankton. They are amoeboid, so they're sort of this oozing mass, and they have a hard shell called a test. So those tests are made of calcium carbonate, silica, or chitin, depending on the species we're talking about. They're heterotrophic, meaning that they eat other organisms, although some also have endosymbiont algae. Their fossils are used in geological dating, right? So they can tell, depending on some of the species that are there, how old the rock is. You can also tell a lot about what sort of climate was present when that rock was formed by what's there as far as the Formifers. Another important thing that they do, because some of them use calcium carbonate to build their shells out of, they get the carbon in that calcium carbonate from atmospheric CO2. So these guys are important in taking CO2 out of the atmosphere, fixing it, and then when they die, their shells sink to the bottom and take that carbon with it. Our second in Rhizaria are Radiolarians. These are also marine plankton. A lot of them, their tests are made of silica, which is pretty cool in that it's basically biological glass. Right? They're very pretty sort of shells to them. A lot of these also have endosymbiont algae, and their fossils are also used in geological aging, figuring out how old strata are, and often in oil exploration. So sometimes they can actually tell if there are certain radiolarian fossils, some of those strata will actually be more likely to hold oil. Then we're moving on to another supergroup. And this supergroup is Excavata. So this is the euglenids, all right, or euglena. This is a very diverse group. There is about 1,000 species that we know of. It includes heterotrophs, photosynthetic autotrophs, and mixotrophs. So these guys will both, some species will only eat other organisms to get their energy. Some of them will only use photosynthesis to get their energy, and some of them will flip back and forth between both. They are characterized by having a photosensitive light spot, a single long flagella that they use to swim through the water, right? And they tend to be this long, skinny shape. Amoebas, all right? So these guys are pretty cool. They have their own. They are part of supergroup Amoebozoa. They most of them are free living, meaning they're out in the environment and they move around using these pseudopodia, right? Or false feet is what it's called. They stream their cytoplasm, they ooze themselves along, and when they want to eat something, because they're heterotrophs, they will engulf like this, like it's engulfing this paramecia here. They will engulf it with their basically ooze around it and then absorb it into themselves. Some of them are parasitic. You may have heard of these. If you ever hear about the brain-eating amoeba, that is an amoeba, an amoebozoan. Plasmodial slime molds are another amoebozoa. Again, something that we refer to as a mold that is not related in any way to fungi. These guys are amoeba-like. They form multinucleated masses. Basically, you have a whole bunch of whole mass of cells that are sort of joined together. So you've got tons of nuclei just floating in this mass of just cell contents. They also expand by extending pseudopodia through the soil and through rotting logs and this sort of thing. They're very common in the forest understory. They also engulf food by this phagocytosis, which is just like our amoeba, that surrounding and dragging in of the food source. The largest known slime mold covers over 1,000 acres. So we've figured out by DNA that 1,000, not 100. We figured out by using DNA that this is all the same organism covering 100 acres. And our last supergroup is Opistoconta. This includes the Dinoflagellates. These are animal-like. They are closely related to sponges. That's something we'll learn about when we learn about invertebrates. They are unicellular and colonial forms. So some of them that live as single cells and some of them that will group together. And they are filter feeders that use their flagella. So they get this whip-like flagella. They can whip that around, flap it around, and it draws water through this collar. And food particles and bacteria and other things like that are trapped there and taken out. So, to wrap up, protists are eukaryotes, just like you and me. They're extremely diverse in lifestyle and morphology, meaning they have a lot of different forms and a lot of different ways of living. They're important parts of the food webs, meaning they are oftentimes the very base of those food webs. They're in both singular and multicellular. Some can cause disease, and they're made up of heterotrophs, autotrophs, and mixotrophs. So some of them make their own food, some of them eat other organisms, and some of them do both. All right, well, thank you all for listening. We'll see you in lab.